going live. The mic's working okay. The lights are too bright, but hey ho, I'll take it as it is. Good evening, my friends. Um, I haven't done a video post, in maybe 3 months or so. That's because so much has been going on, not only in my life, but in the life of the world in which I live, that it's been a struggle just to keep up. Now, the next series of posts I'm going to be putting out there are about what I call the awakening. Now, people everywhere on the entire planet have been talking about this awakening process. Some have viewed it with derision, others have viewed it as a Western thing or a European thing. But my friends, I assure you that it's a global phenomenon. And it's based on the fact that approximately every 24,000 years, um, the world on which we live changes its density. And it includes things like pole shifts and so on, which changes the magnetic field of the planet itself. But long story short, the world is ascending from what it has been in, which is third density, into fourth and fifth density. Um, so, what is that? Now, please try and view it as, say, you standing on the ground floor of your home and looking across the street and out into the street from the perspective of the ground floor. That's third density. Fifth density or fourth density is like standing on the fourth or the fifth floors of your home and looking out across the street. Of course, the most important thing is that your perspective would be so much more different. You would view everything from a slightly different point of view. So that's what's happening with this thing called the awakening and the rise from third into fourth and fifth density. So what is it like to have this experience? First of all, I should say that there is nothing woo-woo about this. It's not something which is a figment of your imagination. It's not something that you're making up. Everything about your body will undergo a change. Uh, uh, and because your body itself undergoes a change, it affects you spiritually as well. Actually, there's a reciprocal relationship. As your psyche changes, it influences your body. And as your body changes, it also influences your psyche. And the changes in your body will be reflected in things like the things that you find attractive to eat, the way you like to spend your time. All of these things will change dramatically, and it won't be because you're, say, 3 months or 6 months older. It will be a quantum shift from one way of being into another. What ascension or raising your density to a higher level, raising your perspective to a higher level, um, won't do is it won't make things like racism, misogyny, child abuse, and war drop off your agenda. You will be facing the same world, but because you will be more perceptive and more kind, the perspective with which you look at problems will change. And so the solutions you find for those problems will change. Um, the most important thing about this change of density, this change of resonance within you as an individual, I would say my experience of it is that you come to understand that your sovereignty as an individual, as a human being, is not negotiable. If it's not negotiable for you, then it's not negotiable for the other person or people in your environment. One. Two, you come to discover that actually your humanity is meaningless without free will. Free will itself is what's required to buttress your personal sovereignty. So, free will is another characteristic of living in fourth or fifth density life. And very connected to that is the idea of freedom of speech. Of course, freedom of speech doesn't mean you can get up and say any old rubbish. Freedom of speech itself has responsibilities. But when I say freedom of speech, I mean that we as individuals have a right to be able to express our thoughts without molestation by any authority that is trying to force you to think a particular way. So it's these three things that characterize an elevated life into fourth and fifth density: sense of your sovereignty, sense of your free will, and the requirement for freedom of speech. And of course, none of these things are meaningful unless these rights are extended to others in our world as well. Now, in the past, we've been very discriminatory about the way human rights, human privileges, and so on have been apportioned to our fellow man. Often we like to think that these privileges are things which should be enjoyed by people who look like us, whatever us may be. And so it is that our world has been characterized by a situation in which different groups have ascribed to themselves certain rights, certain privileges, which they are perfectly prepared to ensure that people who aren't in their community, their tribe, their cohort, their peers, their countries, their nationality, their ethnicity, whatever, they don't care if those other people don't have them, but they demand it for themselves. That, my friends, is what they call third density life. It is a life of double standards, utter hypocrisy, and the devil take the hindmost. Now, so the other things that characterize the lower resonant way of thinking and way of being, that would be third density, is the fundamental idea of duality. When you're in third density life, it's you or me, he or she, me or you, us or them. Everything is characterized by differentiation and separation. And we find it difficult to understand that actually the opposite should be the case. Duality, third density life. The other thing is, what have I got here in my notes? Ah, third density life is characterized by being ruled by the five senses. So the things that we can see, smell, taste, hear, touch, or feel, everything is based on these five senses. And of course, the truth is that there are things called dog whistles, which if we blow, dogs will hear, but human beings won't hear. So there's a limited spectrum, even on the auditory scale, that we have the capacity to hear. And if we base all our decisions purely on what based on our limited physicality, we are able to perceive. We will. It makes no. Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge argument to work out that we are somehow living a suboptimal life. Same with what's visible. The visible light spectrum is under 5% of the entire wavelength of light, which is out there. So that's the thing about third density light: duality, us versus them, leading to conflict invariably, and also a limited range of perceptions which enable us to see only a tiny slice or experience a tiny slice of the potential of what is out there in life. The opposite, or the alternative uh, way of being from the third density when you're moving into fourth and fifth density is multidimensionality. Um, we understand on an instinctive basis, because of our expanded consciousness, that the front of this hand and the back of this hand are both part of the one hand. So that actually the idea of separation between us as individuals, while true at the level of the ego, is completely false at the quantum level, meaning that the way we treat each other will drastically affect the outcomes of life for each other. If we treat each other with respect, there won't be conflict. If we treat each other with contempt, there will be conflict. And I don't know, I'm not making that up. First World War, I think they said it was 20 million who died. Second World War, 80 million people died. There's no imagining what a third world war would look like, because our weapons have got bigger and more deadly over the years. Another consequence of fourth and fifth density life is that as our vibrations rise, we start to perceive other forms of life that we didn't or couldn't acknowledge before. So, for example, in recent months in America, there have been huge congressional hearings called the disclosure hearings, with whistleblowers coming out and saying that actually extraterrestrials have been here on this planet since the 1950s, and that actually the military establishment, the military industrial establishment in America has done deals with these extraterrestrials, not all of which are deals that you and I would be proud of. Now, the most important thing about these deals is that of secrecy. One. Two, even though America prides itself on being the very representation of representative government, the American people didn't know anything about this. Even the presidents that they elected were read in on some of this information on this. I always found bizarre and ridiculous, on a need to know basis. I mean, what part of the nation's life does its chief executive not need to know? But I'll leave that there. So, God, I'm at 14 minutes already. These things just run on and on. So I'm going to round this off to keep it brief. So the point is that we are basically changing our consciousness. I have experienced it. Lots of other people have experienced it. People are talking about it all over YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, TikTok, and other places. But very few people of African origin are. It's not because we're not going through the change. It's not because we're not raising our consciousness. There are other reasons that mitigate against us telling these truths. One of them is the fact that we come from group orientated culture in which people are prevailed upon to follow the group norm. And the greatest insult you can offer a person um, is to call them mad or crazy or weird or different or somehow strange. And of course, the way a person attracts that kind of uh, uh, characterization is just by stepping outside the mold. And of course, if there is one defining characteristic of ascending from third to fourth to fifth density life, it's that you become more of an individual, but crucially, a non-toxic individual. You become more of an individual and discover what your true greatness, your true worth, your true value is. And through the recognition of that, it strikes you that, oh my goodness, if I'm like that, then he's like that, she's like that, he's like that, she's like that, he's like that, she. Actually, the more you respect your own life and its worth, the more you respect other people's lives. It is the people who lack respect for their own worth who are the most beastly, cruel, dictatorial, authoritarian, and destructive people amongst us. So I know many of you are watching this. I know many of you are quietly thinking to yourselves, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. But it takes a lot more to actually come out publicly and say it. And I argue that the more people step out and talk about their personal awakening, the more others will be given permission. You're not forcing anybody. This isn't something you can take a horse to water, you can't ever force it to drink. But the more individuals start to share their insights based on their own awakening, the more others, certainly from my social, cultural, and ethnic background, will feel they have the permission to do the same. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that I'm going to put this on YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel. And there's more to come about this journey of awakening and how it's being experienced. And I know many of you have got very similar experiences, but you need to come out and share them. Thank you very much for joining me, and join me on the next video. Bye.